300. These are yours?
Oliver Samuels here, and I just want to invite you to come out to the
wife
Profile Award
on the water,
Sunday, June 18, 2017 at the Bailey Hall, right up here in Fort Lauderdale. Guess what? Me will be the recipient of the prestigious Lifetime Awards. Don't put one syllable of the meaning of the word prestigious. A black tie affair. Nothing less. Yellow man get to class here, and that is a great achievement. No never be the recipient. I'm taking it to another level.
Know what I am doing? Downloading the Western Union app. I need to send money to my auntie in Nigeria. Know what I am doing now? Checking today's exchange rate to Nigeria on the Western Union app. Now, I'm sending my auntie money to help her with her groceries.
Download the Western Union app today. Use it to check today's exchange rate and send money to loved ones in Nigeria. Western Union, moving money for better.
Western Union makes money from currency exchange. Carefully compare fees and exchange rates, which may vary and are subject to change. NMLS number 906983.
For the most authentic Caribbean food in town, check out Sunsplash Caribbean Bakery and Restaurant. They got a natural organic juice bar that'll get your day started right. Like the Power Punch, the Vegan Juice, the Mega Green, the Immortal, and the Resurrection. And peep this, they have an extended bakery department that whips up my favorite, the hot Hardo breads. White or wheat, that's your choice.
If you're feeling hungry, just grab a bite. At Sunsplash Bakery, the food is right. Jamaican party, Itala veggie. At Sunsplash Bakery, right. Mix the peanut with the caramel porridge.
Serving breakfast, lunch, and dinner. They also cater to vegans and vegetarians with the Ital stew and the Ital aki, the soul jerk salmon and mango tilapia. And of course, they got the usual curry goat, oxtail, ground stew chicken, jerk chicken, and so much more. I mean, their menu is extended and they're highly rated. Your best bet is to just stop by or give them a call. They're open Monday through Wednesday, 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. Thursday through Saturday, 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. and Sundays, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. They're located at 56 Main Street in Orange, New Jersey, and can be reached at 973-395-3777.
These days are so hungry days. We need some more food up on the empty plate. Long time we there and we sit on a wait. Sunsplash restaurant and run the place. Everybody we say just want a taste, yeah.
Let your food be a medicine. Eat well, live longer. I'm David Shepard and I endorse this commercial.
Answer that, don't you? I bet it's killing you, seeing that soft glow just inches away. In case someone wants to tell you something, or maybe ask you something.
Ah, come on, answer it already. Just so we're clear, that wasn't my fault. Next time, ignore your inner thoughts. Don't text and drive. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Council and your friends here at Splash Radio.
Splash Radio, 94.3, New Jersey, Rich.
Well, you don't know, so Mr. G represent for 94.3 FM Splash Radio. We don't splash out the music on them.
Here we go.
Ahem. Your attention, please. This is no ordinary show. Covering news and information for Essex County, New Jersey, and beyond. This is the Eric Dawson Radio Show. Broadcasting from 94.3 Splash Radio. Now, here's your host, giving it to you like only he can. It's Eric Dawson.
Hey, this is Eric Dawson, and this is the Eric Dawson Radio Show, 94.3 FM. Call-in number 457-8000. Again, it's 973-457-8000. If you're listening through your mobile devices, 213-493-0287. And as always, you can check us out. We're streaming live on Facebook. I don't know. I got to say, I'm here on Tuesday with my co-host, Rashon Hasan. How you doing today, bro?
I'm doing well, doing well. Good morning, good people.
Hey. So, I don't know what happened. You came in today, too, and said that yesterday you tried to tune into the show and you were having some technical issues. And I saw one person who is a frequent listener of the show said that when she tried to tune in, she couldn't get in. She thought that they had hacked her computer, man. So I appreciate the passion, you know, and the thought that, you know, people would recognize what it is that we're doing as being so important that that they may that the adversaries may in fact choose to want to hack us as not to have the information spread. Although I don't think that was the case. I think that there was an issue with Facebook, you know, and you know, I'd like to just believe that was it. So how was your weekend, man? How was your Mother's Day?
Mother's Day was awesome. We had a great weekend. My younger brothers wanted to put together dinner outing for my fiance and for my mother. So we went out to Benihana's, which is everyone's favorite restaurant. Had a great time Friday evening. Saturday we attended a Masonic ball out at Galloping Hill, and Sunday we had brunch at our family's restaurant, Iana's Cafe, which is located on Clinton Avenue in Newark. Clinton Avenue and 100th Street, right in the Clinton Hills section of the South Ward. Shout out to my uncle Gene, who did his thing in the kitchen. I mean,
so it's a family restaurant?
Yeah, it's a family-owned restaurant. Doing great in the community. Great food, you know, had steak, lamb, lobster, shrimp, fish. Yeah.
Now, was that a Mother's Day menu or is that an everyday menu?
So he actually has those type of items every day in his restaurant, but we put together that special menu for our family members, you know, his wife and relatives, her side of the family, and the same thing for our family. So we had in total, I would say maybe about 20-25 mothers who were there. We served the food, as you know, the children, the men. We actually served the food for them and prepped, did all of the work for them. So it was definitely a great time for us to just kind of be together and not have to deal with the hustle and bustle of going out to a restaurant and making reservations. We shut the restaurant down for the day, and we just did brunch for our family.
Oh, just for your family?
Just for our family.
Oh, dude.
Yeah.
Oh, man, I thought this was like something everybody could come to. I'm thinking like, oh, man, we need to make sure that he's on next year and we give him the props to be able to promote it.
But that's actually the plan, though, you know. So this is the first time that we actually did this, offering that brunch. And for us, bringing in our family, that now just, lets us know that we're heading in the right direction. And this is something that he's actually looking to do and open up to the general public moving forward.
All right, well, see, I was all excited, and now I'm deflated, man. I'm thinking, I had a relaxing Mother's Day, man. I wished all of the people who I could happy Mother's Day. Folks who I think are doing a fantastic job embracing, motherhood, and then I went out to brunch with my fiance and I came home, man, and just relaxed, just absolutely relaxed. So let's dive into it, man. We got a couple things to talk about. There is Kevin asked me to post this, so I'm gonna post it in the thread. It was in an article in the Atlantic, and I think it was entitled "The Promise of Education."
Yeah, it's restoring the promise.
Restoring the promise.
Restoring the promise of public education.
Right.
And this is a case of Clinton, Mississippi, which is primarily been a state. Mississippi is a state, in the South that is still having a lot of issues as it pertains to segregation. So even though, Brown versus Board of Education allowed us to move forward and allowed us to actually integrate our public school system, there's still a number of schools in the state of Mississippi that still kind of operate under the realm of segregation. And in this case of Clinton, Mississippi, there is a superintendent named Dr. Virgil Bellew. He's a white man who stepped in 1970, and he actually developed the first concept of community schools. So this was actually a good history lesson for me, because I really did not have as much information about community schools, and this is important because we've now seen this movement make its way to Newark. When we start talking about the concept of community schools, and it came about as if it was something that was really brand new. And as I read this article, what I found was that this superintendent, Dr. Virgil Bellew, took it upon himself to integrate the entire school district, and he removed district zoning lines. So it didn't matter where students lived throughout the city. All students had to attend the same schools. It didn't matter if you were black, if you were white, it didn't matter if you were middle class, or if you were poor. All of the students in that community who were high school students, they all attended Clinton High School. There was also, schools that were set aside for students that were in the lower elementary grades, and then students who were in middle school as well. But again, it did not matter where they lived. He put all students in the same schools, so that students can have the benefit of learning from one another. And in this article, it also highlights the fact that African American students in this particular scenario learned and improved their student performance by being in the classroom with other white students throughout the state. And I think that just kind of goes to show what can happen when you collaborate, and you don't restrict children to a particular school or environment because of their geographical location or because of their whatever their financial status may be. So it was very interesting reading this because we saw a lot of pushback in Newark over the last few years as it pertains to the open universal enrollment system that's now used.
Right.
Which I still think to this day is a great idea because it did remove those barriers that existed for many families that live in certain parts of the city. It's a no-brainer. I think everybody knows it's
universal enrollment is still functioning in Newark.
Absolutely.
It's not going anywhere right now, is it?
No.
I mean,
and it shouldn't. I'll be honest with you, I don't think that it should. Universal enrollment, in my opinion, really just formalized a lot of the things that many families have been doing in Newark and other urban school districts for a long time. I think we pretty much were faced with three options. If you were in a neighborhood where there was a failing school, and your family got tired of that, we exercised our own rights. We had our own universal enrollment, if you will, and we did things like we utilized the addresses of other family members who might have lived in another part of the town where the school was better than the one across the street from where you lived. And your parents might let you get on a bus and travel back and forth to school every day. Some parents or some families had, the financial resources to enroll their children into some of the private schools that we had in the city. And we had a thriving group of small independent schools at that time. We had schools like Queen of Angels, right? We had Link before it became a community charter school. And then the last option we had, families exercise. They just kind of got up and moved in some instances because they wanted to put their children in the place.
Well, I told you that's what happened
schools.
when I was a kid. There were kids who, I went to Maple Avenue School. It was a great school when growing up. The whole week break section thing, Chancellor Avenue School, Maple Avenue School. And so there were people who lived in the West Ward who changed their, used a relative's address or something in order to be able to go to Maple Avenue School. So it has been happening. But here's the funny thing about that, and then I want to get back to the article. There's no real conversation about the One Newark plan. I remember when Cammie Anderson was here and there was this big hubbub and everybody was protesting and marching that they wanted to get rid of it. They wanted to get rid of her, down with the One Newark plan. Nobody's marching. Nobody's protesting anymore. So, is it that the One Newark plan is really, with some minor tweaks, a good idea, and somehow Cammie Anderson just proposed it wrong?
Yeah, I think that there was just the environment at the time was just so toxic that anything that Cammie Anderson was proposing was just met with such rejection from the community, and I think a large part of that was, in fact, due to the way that she kind of handled herself and ushered in some of the ideas. And, that was her leadership style. I think that had a lot to do with it. I also think the fact that she was a white woman also played a huge part in terms
Well, now you got a white man.
Yeah,
does that work better?
How she was received. Well, I don't know. I think you have to ask the individuals because, even though she's no longer superintendent, a lot of the things that she first put in place, one, are still here, and then the second phase of those things have been completed over the last few years, and I haven't heard anything about it. I haven't heard any opposition to those things. So, as an example, the One Newark plan wasn't just about universal enrollment. It was really about figuring out how to put students in better facilities and how to close down those school facilities that were dilapidated. And we saw that. We saw a number of schools that were actually shut down. There were no additional funds available to do the major renovations that needed to be done in those schools. But then those schools were then transferred to the Newark Housing Authority, and then there was a public bidding process for those schools or those facilities. So I want to say it was about 11 or 12 facilities throughout the city of Newark that were put up in this public bidding process. One school facility was one that I attended, Bergen Street School, also known as William H. Brown Jr. Academy on Bergen Street. You had Roseville School, which was another one of the schools. Clinton Avenue School, located on Clinton Avenue in Newark. So, again, you had a phase, the initial implementation that was really blocked, and there was a lot of pressure to roll back on those reforms or those initiatives. But since she's left the Newark Public Schools District as superintendent, we've still seen those policies or those reforms being executed. And universal enrollment, I will say, does not get the credit that it deserves. As a board member, a former chairman of the board, one thing I constantly heard was that charter schools in the city of Newark were cherry-picking students. That they would do things like counsel students out of the schools. They had severe special disabilities or were special needs students, and they didn't necessarily have the resources to deal with those particular students. And when you look at the data, you'll find that there was very disproportionate rates in the charter schools as it pertains to the percentage of special needs students that they serve compared to Newark Public Schools. So with universal enrollment, over the last few years, we've seen more of a balance come into take effect. And now when you look at those numbers, the percentage of special needs students that are being served in charter schools is much closer to the average of the district, right? So what it tells me is that that universal enrollment is working in regards to making sure that we have an even level playing field for students, and that they're not being counseled out, or they're not being, or the parents aren't being told when they go into a meet and greet or open house that, hey, this might not be the best fit for your child. And I don't think any parent should hear that when they go into the school. It's a public school. Right. So if the student has any kind of disability, you need to make accommodations. If this is a special needs student, you need to make sure that this student is getting the appropriate resources that he or she needs. So for me, that's been one of the positives of having universal enrollment. And then I'll layer that with the fact that parents and families no longer have to be forced into a failing school, and they no longer have to be restricted to the schools that are in their immediate area, especially if those schools aren't meeting their needs.
And so in the article, what I found to be one of the more fascinating things in terms of the success of it was the engagement that the community had with the school district. That was huge. And so I think that, to your point, the more folks are engaged, meaning that they look and make a conscious decision that, I'm going to take my child, I'm going to move them out of this failing school, I'm going to work to get them in a school where they can be more successful. I think that shows a greater level of engagement for the parent, and I think that we be on our way to to a scenario like the one in the article.
Yeah, you know, the other thing that was really interesting, you know, about this article and what's being done in Clinton, Mississippi, is that there is this enormous effort to make sure that every student is succeeding. There are a plethora of AP courses that are being offered. However, they're not focusing on providing these resources to any particular student because of the color of their skin. They want every student to be able to just go out here, focus, be great. And if they're good, they want to get them to be a little better. And the same thing goes for the teaching staff and those individuals that are there working in the schools to support those students. And they're really taking that approach that it takes a village to raise these children and to make sure that they are prepared for the next level of their lives. Something also stood out to me, in reading this article. You know, oftentimes we think of our schools being segregated. You know, we look at it through the lens of race, right? There are more Latino students over here, or these schools are for the white students, and we have the black students that are attending these schools. When we start to look at how our student demographics are broken down, and we start to look at it through the lens of student performance, I think we'll also find that in communities like Newark in particular, I think that you'll see a larger achievement gap when you look at some schools compared to others in this public education space. So for me, when I look at magnet schools, while they provide great opportunities for students, I also see that kind of school model as a way of dividing the community and dividing the population of students. You know, magnet schools have been around serving students in the community a lot longer than charter schools. But guess what? You are weeded out if you are a student and you're trying to get into a magnet school, because there are certain benchmarks and targets that you have to meet before you're even considered to be enrolled into that school. So when you have this conversation about schools cherry picking students, what's so different about the selection process for magnet schools?
There is none.
Right? So if we're going to have this conversation, we're going to paint that broad brush, and we're going to have dialogue about schools that are cherry picking. In my opinion, I think magnet schools have to be a part of that conversation as well, because if you take the best and brightest students and you put them all together in these one schools, those other students that might be middle of the pack, guess what? Those students don't get the benefit.
But here's the thing that always got me when they talk about cherry picking. Gifted and talented, they cherry pick. AP classes, college prep classes, they cherry pick. All of these things, all of these different programs cherry pick. I remember being a kid in elementary school, and they would come and get certain kids. I wasn't one of those when I was in the fourth grade, but they would take some of the kids out, and they were in accelerated classes. They did it, whether it was an accelerated math class, they would pull them out and take them. Then they bring them back. I didn't feel any particular way about it. I didn't feel, like they should keep that kid in the classroom and have that kid suffer. If that child had advanced and had done the necessary work to be able to qualify to go off to that other school classroom, and we never knew where that classroom was, by the way. They just went off for a period, and then came back. But they did it, and everybody understood that. I mean, look, it is, to me, a part of the way that the world works, right? That, there is competition in everything. There's competition, whether you're talking about martial arts, you're talking about sports, or you're talking about education. There's competition. And, you have, with the exception of, I guess, county college, right? You have all of the universities, they pick. There's a selection process. So I never really understood that. And I think that, you need to have public education. But, every kid is not going to be exactly the same. Everyone is not going to learn at the same rate. And even a public school has to make accommodations for that.
Yeah. But so, let's peel back. Let's unpack that a little more. You mentioned martial arts, right? Even with sports, right? I think there's this element of leadership that exists where some individuals who have a certain level of talent, they make the other people around them better. People benefit from being around individuals who are on top of their game and individuals who are doing it. So that doesn't just start when people become adults, right? Like, hey, you go to work and you have someone who's like a superstar, they're performing, and you have other individuals that may not necessarily be on that level. However, because of the way this other person performs and exhibits their leadership, those individuals around them get better. Like, that just doesn't happen when we're adults. The same thing happens in the public education space, and it happens with our children. So I say that to say, when you start to cherry pick and you start to extract those students, and you're only just putting those high performers together and leaving everybody else, I think you miss out on that opportunity to foster a true environment of collegiality. And that's an environment that really is driven by collaboration, right? As opposed to one that's strictly driven by competition. Competition is good, it's healthy, but at the same time, we also need our children to have those opportunities where they can collaborate and they can learn from each other as well.
But when you look at like the statistic that came out the other day, there was an article in in Tap Into Newark, I think it was, that talked about North Star being such a high achieving school. Well, we celebrate that, but part of that is that, and I don't know, I mean, people say that the charter schools cherry pick, but my understanding was that the rigor in the charter school is what weeds out those who are less capable of keeping up. That either the parents or the children themselves, just kind of wilt under the, I don't want to say pressure, but under the enormous task of being able to keep up with the workload, right, and the expectations. That's my understanding. But now, if that winds up being the case, if excellence is the standard, and there are people who just can't reach that standard, then I don't know. It's almost like the natural selection process, right? The weak perish, the strong survive. And we celebrate those schools. We're happy to see that they're ranked where they are, but certainly they wouldn't be ranked if you had, dozens of D or F or C students. They wouldn't have ranked where they ranked.
Yeah, so I think that the problem that I have with that is it's our job as educational leaders to work with those children so that they are able to rise to the level of expectation that we have for them. So I think any kind of system that's put in place to weed people out as opposed to meeting them where they are and helping them grow, that's problematic, because to weed them out, that's the easy thing, right? If you come to me as a D student, guess what? My expectation is that when you leave,
but I'm going to use the football analogy again.
Student.
I'm going to use the football analogy again, right? You may not be the best football player in the world, right? When you try out for your high school team, doesn't mean that the coach doesn't put you on the team, but you're not a starter. Doesn't put you on the A team, and maybe you're not even on the B team. Maybe the coach put you on the JV team. Do you know what I'm saying? And now if the roster is filled and you can't fit on a JV team, then maybe you don't play. Then maybe you find another sport. And so, that has kind of, it was the way my kids played soccer. You had travel teams, you had club teams, and then you had the premier teams, right? So for the ones who can't make the in-town travel team, and then you had A, B, and C teams within those. And I remember my youngest kid, and I'm comparing it to sports, and maybe, I don't know if it's a good analogy or not, or good comparison. But my kid, my second oldest, was so competitive that she said to me, she said, "Dad, I don't want to play for this team anymore." She was 10 years old. And at that point, they were still giving the participation ribbons out. And she said, "Dad, I don't understand this. We won the tournament. We beat every team in the tournament. And why are we getting the same ribbon they're getting?" And I looked at her and I said, "I never did." She said, I want a trophy. So that next year, she tried out for a team and played up so that she would be able to compete for trophies. And there should be room for kids like that to be able to do it. That's what I'm saying. So if you have a kid, you know, and somebody in the thread says, she says, every person doesn't learn at the same rate, which is what we said. Why hold a person back? So do you think that by not cherry picking, we're holding some people back from being able to really reach their potential? Because now they're in a, you know, you're monitoring the level of growth and the level of excellence that classroom could really be. If we accept the motto that steel sharpens steel, right? So if I've got an A student and next to another A student, the idea is they're going to compete and you're going to get maybe something amazing out of that. If you've got a A student and you've got a C student, that A student is pulling that C student up. That C student isn't, I don't know, and maybe they are, I don't know. Maybe they are helping that A student. But that becomes the question.
Yeah, so I think, you know, when you had a conversation, we used the analogy of sports team. The sport team, you know, that's entertainment. I don't think you need every child to be a good soccer player, you need every child to be a good football player. But I would say by all means, we need every child that's being educated in this educational system that we have to be a great student. And we need to provide them with those opportunities. So I'm saying there's data that shows that when you have high-performing students in the classrooms with students that are maybe not as high-performing, that those lower-performing students do see a greater benefit as opposed to them just being isolated and being by themselves. So if we're looking at this educational system for what it's supposed to do, right, in its truest sense, which is to provide everybody with a thorough and efficient education, right? And the goal is to produce the next generation or group of individuals who are going to be the leaders of this country.
Right, but everybody's not going to be a leader. You want to push that?
But everybody's going to have to have.
But everybody's not going to be a leader. Everybody
might not necessarily be a leader in the sense of having a title, but everybody has a role to play as we move forward and we talk about re-engineering.
But when we go,
right?
when we go into a corporation, right? You can have a corporation that has 2,000 employees. You have one CEO. You have 2,000 worker bees, and you have one CEO. So when you look at that ratio plays itself out in the classrooms as well. So if you're trying to get those 2,000 people to become a CEO as well, and they're not geared to be a CEO, then my question is: are you really providing the environment for the naturally born CEO to rise and reach his or her full potential?
So in that same breath, right? How can you expect a person to be a leader if they've never seen what real leadership is like? So for the B student, who's to say they can't be an A student?
Oh, right? I'm not saying. I'm not trying to hold them back.
But this becomes the argument. If we're only keeping the B and the C students together, and they never get an opportunity to see what an A student is, how can they strive towards that? They don't see it, and that's what I mean when we just keep these low-performing students and we trying to like push them off to the side and we bottle them and we keep those people grouped together. You also need to see those examples of what those high-performing students look like. Just like you and I being in this space together. You're successful at what you do. I'm standing around with you. We go to meetings. We're hanging. We're sharing ideas. Guess what? I'm getting better just because I'm with you and what you have and what you're offering is rubbing off on me.
I'm not saying that student couldn't do that through summer school or through some other kind of programs that are outside of the normal school day. Let's take this call. Caller?
Good morning, Eric and Rashon. This is Farrakhan.
Good morning,
man.
Good
morning.
Good morning. I feel you, Rashon, but at the same time, where's the data for the high-performing student that gets stuck around a bunch of low-performing students to see if that high-performing student is excelling to even greater heights? I hear you when you say, well, if you put high-performing people with lower-performing people, it will raise the lower-performing people up. But how does that help the high-performing people? Because if you're saying that people learn from the people that are around them that do better and do more, then you need to have high-performing people around other high-performing people so that they can excel to greater levels. Because if you're putting them with people who aren't on their level, are you slowing them down some? And that's the other question to it. Because that's the data you don't see.
So what I'm asking is this. So, Brother Farrakhan, if we took students, like Eric used the example of gifted and talented programs, if you didn't have a gifted and talented program at a school, those students that we would consider to be top of the tier, they would also be mixed into that, I would think, that general education setting with other students who were also on their level as well. What I'm saying is that we would have a more diversity inside of those classrooms. That's what I'm saying. I don't think that. I think the argument can be made, on either end of the spectrum. So regardless of where the students are, they need to be challenged, right? But I think there's also a benefit to students being in the diverse in the classroom where there's a diverse setting, where you have students from all backgrounds and students who are on all levels. There's some challenge. Teachers need to be able to differentiate in the classroom setting and also challenge those students. And I think there's some opportunities for those students to learn and connect with one another. So I just don't want us to be in the mindset where those students get left out and they don't have that opportunity to grow and develop as well. And by no means do I think that a student who is high performing or a student who has their act together, I don't believe that their opportunity should be squandered. But I think that when we look at this data that's been presented in this article that's here, it shows us that there is one school district that's actually been able to do this thing right and put those students in the same settings, and everybody has benefited from it. I'm not saying that this will happen everywhere, but when I look at, again, Newark,
so what do you think?
What
do you think the secret sauce was? I'll give you another quick story. My third oldest child, and we didn't even know. We were going. She was attending school in Berkeley Heights. She was in elementary school, and we got a letter in the mail saying that we were invited to go to an event at one of the other schools for a program called Quest for our kid. And because, Nia was on a soccer team with other kids, naturally you're talking to the other parents. So we're telling the other parents, oh, we're going to this thing tomorrow night. It's about Quest. What is it going to be about? And those parents are saying, we didn't get anything in the mail about that. So they're like, really? And so we brought the letter in and we showed them on the sideline of soccer field. They said, we didn't get that. So now we're curious. We're wondering, well, why didn't every parent get it, right? This is, was sent out from the school. So we did additional research, and it was like a gifted and talented program. And what they had been doing was monitoring the children from kindergarten up to fourth grade. And they made a determination based on some algorithms that these particular kids would be well suited for this extraordinary accelerated program in a program called Quest. So we went, and it was crazy because we realized, like, oh my gosh, they literally segregated the town when they did that. And so we sat and listened to the whole thing, and they talked about the rigor, but the excitement in it. And then they went further. Now, Nia was going to be going into the 5th grade, but what they said was by her doing this and by all the kids involving themselves, they would be on a path so that when they got to high school, they would all go into AP classes. And they went further and said that the kids who were not in Quest would probably never get into the AP classes, because what would be required if you didn't go into Quest to be able, which is what you're saying. So how do I get there? If you don't go into Quest now, how do I get into an AP class? And so we're scratching our heads. I looked and said, you know what? We're going to put our kid in Quest. Right, and there were a lot of, and now this is in Berkeley Heights, so this is in an affluent community, great school system. I think they have 96 or 97% graduation rate, right? But even there was a level of competition in terms of being good, being better, and being best.
Yeah. So,
thanks for the call, Farrakhan.
Yeah, thanks, bro. So, as a parent, first thing pops into your mind, this is an opportunity for my kid, yada yada. But then you're also, to you, right, you're a person who's critiquing this, you're saying to yourself, well, man, like, who decided that this was the cutoff? or who decided, like, what this algorithm was to determine that my kid was the one to go as opposed to anybody else. And the thing about it is, you know, kids, they don't all develop at the same rate. You know, like, just like kids go through growth spurts, sometimes they go through learning spurts. And you see kids, all of a sudden, you know, they might have been a C student, might have been going through it, and now something happens along the way, and now this student is now
I went through a learning spurt.
Right? And they're kind of, you know, right, and they're able to then step up.
Right.
Go back and you use the analogy of the sports that you use, right? You have some folks that come in, you know, as their first year in the sports program, and you're like, man, this joker should have been a water boy. And then you look at them 2 years later, they're a starter, and they're out there just doing wonderful as it relates to that particular sport or whatever program it is that they're in. So I think when we put those kind of initiatives in place, I think sometimes when people, you know, they miss that cutoff, when does that person now get another opportunity to be able to rise to that level of expectation? And I think those are the kind of questions that we need to be asking, because again, not everybody's gonna be the CEO of the organization, but guess what? We're gonna need some strong CFOs. We're gonna need some individuals that can lead HR and do all these other things.
I agree, but maybe, and I didn't ask because my kid got in, right? So I didn't have to ask the question, well, my kid's not in, how do they get in? Or how when they get to high school, how do you evaluate them for AP if you're only looking at the kids who are coming through this fast track called Quest? But what I would imagine is you have all kinds of things that you can involve your kid in. You have Huntington Learning Center and all of these other outside programs that you can get your kid involved in, and then maybe taking those test scores or taking that information to them, you know, says to the district, you know what, wow, we see that this kid was a slow starter, but wow, they look like they're going to be a strong finisher, and you know what, we're going to test them in or do whatever it is that they do to see whether or not they qualify for, you know, these advanced placement classes. But I think this is, again, in the article, I don't know that that they really go into detail. They do talk about how the community is engaged. But still, even here, in this article, as great as that school is, you still have parents who say, we're not sending our kid there.
Yeah, you have some parents who just say, you know what, we're going to pay for our students to go to a private school. And in this in the context of this article, this is what we would consider to be the white flight, right? So when you start to see schools become more integrated, particularly in the South, you started to see things like white flight, where individuals were then taking their children out of those schools and putting them into private schools. But we also see some of this happening in communities where you have school choice programs, and parents are becoming more aware of the options that are available to them, and they no longer want their children to be enrolled in certain schools. It could be that the schools are failing, and parents believe that they don't have time to sit around and wait for this turnaround model to work, so they exercise their right to put their children in other schools so that their needs and their expectations can be met.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I think this is a great conversation to have. But parents, at the end of the day, the thing to recognize is parents are trying to find better opportunities to give their children a leg up, because it is competition.
Yeah. No, it's definitely competition. There's always going to be competition. Competition is healthy. I think it helps us become better at what it is that we do. You know, and I think children are way more competitive. I think, my son, he's very competitive. I think, in his classroom, he always wants to be the kid that's raising his hand and answering the questions. But I think what I like about what I see in his classroom is that there are also opportunities for him to connect with some of the students who may not be performing as well as he is. Which I think is good. If he's going to be in that environment with those kids, he has some knowledge and some information that he can share, whether it's helping out with math or whether it's helping some of his peers, read some books that they have in the classroom. I like to see those things. I think it's helpful, and I think it benefits everybody. And then again, the teachers have to always be meeting those students where they are and pushing those students to become better every day.
So, question. Gonna shift topics because I haven't seen you since since Betsy DeVos went and spoke at Bethune-Cookman, right? She got booed.
Yes, as to be expected.
What were your thoughts about that?
Well, I think you and I talked about this earlier, and I can be honest with you, Eric. I think that this is another example of why of individuals in the community being outraged about things that are happening on a federal and on a national level, but not really caring about what's happening locally. I don't understand how folks can be so outraged about a person who's doing things on the federal level which have less of an impact on what's happening to you locally, and aren't outraged with some of the decisions that we've seen being made in our communities on the local and on the state level over the last few years. So we've already seen what the administration, the Trump administration, has done on the education front. We all know that there's a huge support for school choice programs, voucher programs, things of that nature. So it should be no surprise when we hear of some of the things that are coming forward from this administration.
Let me ask you a question though. She took a lot of heat for calling HBCUs a choice.
A choice, yeah. So I think there's not that I think I know, there's a huge disconnect. I think I talked about this on one of the previous shows. There's a huge disconnect with those comments that she made, because HBCUs were created. They were the only option for us as African Americans in this country at one point in time.
But they're a choice now.
But now, right, we do have a choice to go to other schools if we choose to. So I think it rubs some people the wrong way.
Do you think she was speaking historically about it, or do you think she was speaking now about it when she referred to them as being a choice?
Well, honestly, I can't say. She didn't really elaborate in her comments, but I think hearing it, that initial thought made me feel that she was referring to how HBCUs were established and created in this country, and she didn't come back and make any corrections to her statement or elaborate on those comments any further. So, I can't speculate because I don't know what was in the woman's mind when she made the comment.
Well, Ian and I, we got pretty heated, and so did his audience on Facebook with me about it, because I said, here's this woman who has access to resources that are desperately needed by HBCUs, right? And you have a president who she works for who said that he is committed to dumping millions upon millions of dollars into needed infrastructure for these HBCUs. So, and then you have the president of the college who said he met with her, right, and recognized the need to build networks to be able to get these much needed resources, which is why he invited her to speak. And so after all of that, if you need the money, you got the person who can likely give you the resources, right? You've got her boss who's saying that he is unwavering in his commitment to give the resources. Why would you boo her?
Well, let's look at the audience. Who was she speaking to? She was speaking to an audience of graduates from an HBCU who are also the victims of some of the changes that this administration has made. So one thing that has hit many of college graduates very hard is the fact that this administration is looking to pull back and reverse some of the initiatives that President Barack Obama put in place to provide relief to college students as it pertains to the heavy debt load that they've taken on.
No, but Obama does not have a very good record of dealing with HBCUs. In fact, some of the policies he put in place caused created a gap in terms of students being able to get funding. And so my question would be, would those same students have booed him, given the millions and millions of tens of millions of dollars that he ultimately cost HBCUs? Because the presidents of these HBCUs were not very pleased with Obama.
Well, I think that remains to be seen. President Obama is President Obama, and Betsy DeVos is Betsy DeVos.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, did it have to do with, well? And then I said to Ian also that I didn't think that not about me thinking. I know, based on what I read, that the protest was not organic, that there were people, and I used the word radicalized, but I said there were people who showed up on the campus 2 weeks prior to her showing up, radicalizing those students, getting them all, hyped up, to do what they ultimately did.
Well, I think, at the end of the day, I think it was a poor showing on behalf of the university. So you mentioned that the president had met with her prior to and had these discussions. I think as a president of Bethune-Cookman College, I'm hoping that there was some kind of dialogue with the graduating class and members of the student body to stress to them the importance, because I think there's a learning opportunity within this particular situational scenario. We first had conversations on the show about what support looks like for HBCUs moving forward. I think I did stress the importance of being able to collaborate with this administration and to be able to have clear and constructive dialogue about the needs and the futures of HBCUs so that they could establish some strong partnerships. And I don't think that situations like this necessarily help. I'm just hopeful that moving forward you can continue to have that dialogue, and that we have representatives like Dr. Michael Lomax with the United Negro College Fund to help move us forward so that we do get the funding that we need and the support we need on the federal level. And lastly, it's important for us, myself and others who are alums of HBCUs, to make sure that we're properly doing what we need to do to support our own institutions.
That is the important thing.
If we had, a strong base of alums across the board at HBCUs, it doesn't matter if you can get $5 or if you could get 5,000. Every dollar counts, and if you have something that you can give to help support your alma mater, you do so. And if that's the case, then that allows us to move forward and try to reduce these funding gaps that we have so that we don't have to walk around here with our hands out.
So listen, in the next hour, we're going to talk about an op-ed piece that was written by Senator
Teresa
Ruiz regarding pre-K funding and such. Because I pulled up an article. I don't know if you ever saw this, but it talks about a 30 million word gap, right? By the age 3.
Yeah.
By the age of 3, guys. Right? 30 million. It says that families who have I guess not necessarily more affluent, but the kids are more exposed. That child by the age 3 will have a 30 million word gap advantage over a child who is, I guess they say from welfare families, but I think it's not so much about being from welfare families. It's more about having a lack of exposure, right? So we're gonna have that discussion, because it's important to understand that if you don't plant the tree right, if you plant it crooked, it's gonna grow crooked.
Absolutely.
Right. So you have to be about the business of planting it right. But before we do that, I want to spend the next couple minutes. I'm telling you, I'm gonna do this on every show. I checked this morning the Newark Board of Education website, and I looked at the
meeting schedule.
No, not the meeting schedule, but the board members. Are you going there now?
I'm going there.
Yeah. Can you go look and see whether or not they put the bios of the new board members yet?
Yep, absolutely.
I think it's all the way over to the right. Because as of the time that I looked, I didn't see the new board members' bios there.
No.
Okay.
They're not even listed on the. Actually, let's see. Hold on.
I think they're listed.
They're listed, but no bios.
But no bios, right?
No hyperlinks to the bios.
No hyperlinks to the bios. And so I'm gonna say it again. It's been. I think
actually, there's one for Josephine Garcia.
Oh, her bio's up.
Her bio's there.
Okay. Let's see. Wait a minute. Come on. Is Reggie's bio? Because you know what we're looking for.
Yeah, I know, but I don't have a hyperlink up here that allows you to click on Reggie Bless or Floisha Johnson.
So Floisha is not there either, right? Because I want to see Floisha's bio indicate that she managed the $80 million budget. No, $800 million.
Yes.
Right? That's what she said she did, right? So I think it's important, right? Because that was one of the crowning things that she said allowed her to be able to sit on $1 billion board. That she had managed an $800 million budget. So I think it's imperative that show up there. And I think it's imperative that Reggie Bledsoe's bio indicates that he received a degree from Montclair State University. Now, we talked about this during our education week that, we know factually that Reggie didn't... For you guys who listen, that wasn't a beer. I thought it was at first, man. I heard it crack open. Then I looked at my clock. I said, it ain't even 11 o'clock. What am I thinking? I'm sorry. But, but Reggie hasn't gotten a degree. And it's time for him, to really fess up. The election was on, what was it, the
25th of April?
It was the 25th of April. And today is... the 16th, right? So how long is that? I mean, it's been a while, right? It's been a while, guys, and Reggie has not done that. So he said he was going to do it right after he got elected, and so what is it? I'm looking now, right? We're a month. We're literally a month, right? 25th? No, 1, 2. We're 3 weeks.
3 weeks out.
3 weeks out. So Reggie, it's been 3 weeks and still no degree.
I do want to say there are people in the community that are talking about it.
Are they?
Definitely.
More people should be talking about it.
I was at Jimenez on Friday, and I had a member of the community actually stop me and ask me about it. So there are individuals, we might not see as much chatter about it on Facebook and on social media, but there are individuals in the community who are concerned about it, and for them. As it's been explained to me, this is something that they believe is problematic, and that if this is a sign of what things will look like when local control is restored in Newark, they're very concerned.
Yeah, fraudulent behavior, lying, misleading, cheating, all of that. That's all the characteristics that we see right now.
Bottom line is, look, if you don't have it, you don't have the credentials, then you don't have it. It wasn't a prerequisite to run for the office.
So then you got to ask, why do you do it? Right, so you didn't have to do it, but you were compelled to do it anyway. So it speaks to character. But beyond his character, it speaks to the character of all of the people. The funders, the supporters, the elected officials, the ministers, anybody who supported him, who is not at this moment telling him that he needs to come forward and be truthful with Newarkers. You are all complicit in this fraudulent behavior.
But, I would also add that you are a part of the problem. If you support that kind of behavior, then you are a part of the problem, period. There's no need for anybody, in this space to be dishonest and not be truthful about who they are and what they truly represent. There's no need for us to try to step outside of who we are as individuals and try to portray ourselves as someone other than the person that God made us to be, period.
Absolutely. So listen, Reggie, please, just admit it. Admit it. And then we'll stop talking about it. And then we'll move on. Newark has proven to be a town of forgiveness. Right?
For some.
For some. For some.
Not for everybody.
Not for everybody. But, there is redemption. But first you have to acknowledge that you did something wrong. And, and I'm going to make sure that we talk about it. But we'll be right back after this break.
The current time,
Flash Radio 94.3. Reggae, dance hall, soca, hip hop and R&B.
Is your phone connected to your computer?
Disco, oldies but goodies.
Hi, this is Janet Jackson.
We're bridging the gap. Seriously. Splash Radio 94.3, New Jersey.
Are you looking Looking for real Jamaican cooking? Look no further than the real, authentic, and bona fide spot in Newark, New Jersey. Star's Pressure Pot Restaurant at 347 Sanford Avenue, serving the best curry goat, oxtail, steamed fish, jerk curried, fried, and brown stew chicken. Call today, 973-350-6657. There's always a special at Star's Pressure Pot Restaurant. Stew Beef Tuesdays, Stew Beef Wednesday, Cowfoot Thursdays, Seafood and Fish Fry Fridays, Saturdays it's Portland Jamaica style jerky. You name it. Star's Pressure Pot Restaurant is open every day, Monday to Thursday, 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. Friday and Saturdays till 10 p.m. And check out early Sundays, noon to midnight, with all your favorite games. There's a live broadcast every Sunday at Star's Pressure Pot Restaurant with all your favorite DJs. Catering and delivery, call today, 973-350-6657, or check them on the web at starspressurepot.restaurant.com. It's always a good day at Star's Pressure Pot Restaurant.
We know that when it comes to your vehicle maintenance, you've got a lot of options. In fact, with so many options, it can be challenging sometimes to find a reliable and affordable auto mechanic. But that's where we come in, Belmont Motor Works. With a commitment to providing our customers with honest, quality service at reasonable prices. Belmont Motor Works has one of the most modern, state-of-the-art automotive service and repair facility in the entire state of New Jersey. Our technology, education, and expertise will provide you with the best car care service imaginable. For an appointment, dial 973-268-8199. Right now, get a check engine light diagnostic, an oil change or tune-up, brakes, or just a performance upgrade. Belmont Motor Works got it covered. We're your one-stop shop, the European specialist, specializing in BMW, Mercedes-Benz, Range Rover, and all luxury and high-performance vehicles. 973-268-8199. We also install engines, transmissions, starters, alternators, timing belts, water pumps, and so much more. Trust the trusted Belmont Motor Works, conveniently located at 531 Central Avenue in Newark, New Jersey, and find us on the web at www.belmontmotorworks.com.
Mr. G represent for 94.3 FM Splash Radio. We don't splash out the music on them. Mr. G represent for 94.3 FM
on 94.3 FM.
I always do that. And you know what that is? It's because I have the Facebook Live thing up, so the sound is playing through there, and I always forget to turn that off when I do my. So I'm gonna do it clean so you guys can hear what it sounds like.
You're listening to the Eric Dawson Radio Show on 94.3 FM.
All right, so we're back. But you know what? You just mentioned something. In the spirit of, and I think it's important, right? We have a guy, Ronnie Kellum, who was it last year he ran for the board?
I want to say the year before that.
Okay, so he ran for the Board of Education. A few weeks ago, I happened to turn on my Facebook page. Well, I shouldn't say I happened to, because I turn it on every day, intentionally. And I saw his mugshot there, and he had been arrested for some drug stuff, right? But this is a guy who has a page right now up that says that he's running for council.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So I haven't gone to the page yet, but I actually came across a post from Eric McLemore, and it's actually kind of I had to laugh at it, laugh at the post when I read it. Let me see if I can pull it up again. So Eric McLemore says, "Good morning, kings and queens. So family, Ronnie Kellum has announced that he will be running for office in 2018. I forgot which set. Forgive me, it's early."
I don't get it.
So yeah, which gang set?
Right. But I don't get it. I don't get the idea that I mean, again, I guess he can run, right? There's nothing that says he can't.
Yeah, but why is that acceptable though?
That's exactly right.
I think that's the question that needs to be asked.
Exactly
so,
right.
I think that in Newark and in any other community, when people are not doing what they need to do, there's no way that someone who was caught up in this drug ring or whatever those accusations, those charges were, I don't think they'd be out here in one of these more affluent towns. I would say like a Livingston as an example, on Facebook, promoting the fact that they're trying to seek a seat on the municipal council.
They'd run him out of Livingston. They would just run him out of Livingston.
And we need to be doing the same thing in our community. Like, we cannot continue to accept these mediocre individuals who want to step up and run for elected office, especially when people are coming to the table with all of this baggage. Now, I do understand that everyone has been, everyone is innocent till proven guilty. I don't know what the outcome.
But then handle that business.
But handle that before you start stepping into this arena, to do the work of the public to help try to move the community forward.
I think it's a distraction.
It's a huge distraction, and we don't need this baggage. We're talking about moving the city of Newark forward. I support young leadership. I want to see, my young brothers and sisters step up and have an opportunity. But get your house in order before you step out here trying to help somebody else's house.
And we're going to take this call, and then I'm going to talk about somebody else who's looking for redemption. Caller?
Hey, what's happening, fellas? It's Farrakhan again. I'm not calling a message off, but when I heard you guys just talk about the guy, Ronnie, whatever his name is, and all I thought of, well, you got to think, one of our greatest and most famous black mayors ever, Washington, D.C., the capital of the United States of America.
Are you talking about the guy who got caught with a crack pipe?
Okay, yes, Marion Barry. We loved him, and they reelected him. So in the black community, we're forgiving enough to understand that.
Well, that's what I said.
You might have a little change.
Well, but that's why I said to Reggie Bledsoe, just come on out and admit that you don't have a degree. We are a forgiving people. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, man. Just come out and say that you were wrong. Do a Jimmy Swaggart.
But Farrakhan, do you think would you agree that it's at least fair to say that if you are going to step into that arena, and you, especially now that this stuff has been out in the public domain, if you still have you're tied up in those issues, try to clear that stuff out before you come in and have to usher in, that kind of baggage if you're stepping up into the public space.
Listen, I would say most likely that, that makes most sense. Finish the case first. Because I would see it as like, okay, well, you're going to get elected and then maybe have to go and do a small little bid. What if they tell you got to go do a 364 while you're the councilman of somebody's town, in the town? So surely I would say go ahead and get that, finished first. But again, there are rules, right? And like you were saying about the guy, Reggie Bledsoe, if it's not a prerequisite that you have a college degree, then it doesn't matter. So it may not, I don't know what the prerequisites are for councilmen, whether or not you can be one with a record or with pending charges. But if not, then I guess he's got the right. So just put him out there like this is your show. Expose the man the way you view him to be, and let the people decide.
All right. Well, thank you, man. So listen, you too, man.
Peace.
We've got another guy. He's going to come on the show. His name is David D. Walsh. Now, I just tried to go back to his website. His website is down. You might be able to check him out on Facebook, though. But I had gone to his website once. Again, his name is David D. like David Walsh, W-A-L-S-H. And he's running for at-large councilman. I know this is an education show, but I think that it's all important because these people are.
They should be supporting education too.
That's absolutely right. And these people impact some of the policies that take place, right? We see our council people, we see Reggie Bledsoe is a legislative aide to a council person. We see Josephine Garcia is a legislative aide to a council person, right? So, so the council plays a big role. But anyway, David D. Walsh, on his page, which you can't find right now, he said that he wanted to be honest and and forthright with people in the community. So he said that he was a twice convicted felon, right? One was for, I don't remember the first one, but the other one was for vehicular manslaughter, right? So, but he says that he's since turned his life around and has done extraordinary things in the community. And so, like, look, we have to determine where the bar is. So I'm having him on the show, and you guys know how I do. I allow folks to shine if they can on the show. I'm not going to debate him about the issues. I'm not going to try to embarrass him about it, but I am going to ask him, what is it about his background that makes him feel that he is qualified to be an at-large council person in the city of Newark? But when you look at his record, and I can't help but do it, right? When you go down the line and you start to look at the quality of people or the character of people, and I don't know him yet, so maybe I'm prejudging him, but I'm inclined to say, wow, a guy, twice convicted felon, says I want to be an at-large councilman in the city of Newark. It's crazy. That's crazy, man. But on to the next topic. Senator Ruiz wrote an op-ed piece in the paper. I think I posted it. If I didn't, I will share it in this thread, and you guys can read it. Headline is NJ lawmaker school funding reform must include pre-K expansion. Right? So, thoughts about that, man?
So,
how important is pre-K?
Extremely important. Parents who don't take advantage of enrolling their children in pre-K programs, you're putting your children at a huge disadvantage. I've seen this time and time again where students are, just coming into kindergarten, and that's, they're having that first educational experience. And trust me, it is a rough road for a lot of those students. Some of them don't have the social skills that are required or needed, of students from students of that age.
Mm-hmm.
So not only may they be experiencing academic challenges, but they're also not used to engaging with other children or other adults for that matter, which also poses a huge problem on those students. And I think leads to a large number of African American students in particular being classified as special education or special needs students at such an early age.
So, I did mention this 30 million word gap. I think I deleted that link, because I wanted to share that with folks too. Million.
So there's actually a book, and the book is entitled Meaningful Differences and the Everyday Experiences of Young American Children. And there's a summary article which is called The Early Catastrophe, the 30 million word gap by age 30. And researchers from the University of Kansas reported a study investigating language development in young children. And among their findings, they've introduced some data which indicates that children from professional families would hear roughly 30 million more words by age 30 than children who are from welfare families. So, even if we just let's remove that word welfare from the context of this discussion, and let's just say when comparing professional families, we might be able to make a correlation to middle class. When comparing those families to low income families or families that live in poverty, right?
Right, but understand, it's not the lack of money, right? Because my family didn't have a lot of money growing up. My grandmother, didn't come from money. My grandfather worked at Jackhammer, but they did very well raising their children. Sent my uncle off to Columbia. He became the first black executive at American Express. My dad became the chief of staff to the first black mayor of a major city, and also became the president of the Board of Education and sat on Jimmy Carter's council, education council. So, and then my aunts have done extraordinary things as well. So it's not about and my grandmother at one point, I believe, may have been on welfare, collected welfare, to help her get through rough times. But I think it's a lack of will, right? A lack of engagement of your children, which may be a result of you being preoccupied with some of the things that you being impoverished bring about.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. Children are they're like sponges. They soak up whatever it is we're throwing at them.
But 30 million words, understand that, guys.
That's huge. That's huge. So when you look at the being exposed to 30 million words, right, by age 3, you're talking about this huge gap that now exists. You're not just talking about a lack of exposure as it pertains to, having conversation with your children. You're also talking about a lack of exposure to other cultures, other experiences. Like, there's a lot that goes into that 30 million word gap, and it's not just about reading words on pages, but I think it's also about the kind of exposure that you're providing to your children as it pertains to experiences. You're taking your kids to the museum. You're enrolling your children into summer programs. Are you only allowing them to listen to certain kind of music? Was it rap, gangster rap, hip hop music? Is that the only thing that you're exposing your children to, where they hear the same words being repeated over and over again?
Right. So apparently, according to this article, the School Funding Reform Act, it's of 2008, right? So this is what it says. It says the problem is that 9 years after passage of the act, state-supported preschool programs have added just 3,000 new pupils. Today, only 1 out of 4 3-year-olds and only 1 out of 3 4-year-olds in New Jersey have access to preschool. That's 52,000 out of an estimated 185,000 who would benefit.
Absolutely.
Right? So, I want you to understand this. So when we're talking about these early ages, it's 3 years old, we're saying that if your children don't get the intervention, right, don't get the exposure, don't get the attention, they will fall behind by roughly 30 million words to their counterparts. And so now, how do you catch up?
Well, let's unpack that a little more and layer that with the missed benefits for these particular students. So children who attend preschool are less likely to be held back a grade. They're less likely to be placed in special education, and they are more likely to achieve academic success in high school and to graduate. They're also less likely to be arrested as both juveniles and adults. They enjoy better health and are more likely to be employed rather than end up in the government assistance system.
So let's stop for a second. What did I say before we went to the break? If you don't plant a tree, if you plant it crooked, it's going to grow crooked. So we are out here dealing with kids in the community right now. We're talking about jobs, we're talking about crime, we're talking about all of these things, right? But we're already raising the next crop. Already, guys. So for every 3-year-old or 4-year-old that you don't see in preschool, we are already cultivating the new crop of kids that are going to be out there doing what these kids are doing that we're complaining about right now.
And again, all of these conversations that we have, we talk about health and wellness. We talk about the economic impact that, certain laws and certain policies are having on our community. But the one common thread in all of these discussions that we have on this show during the course of the week, everything ties back to education.
Right, everything.
It all comes back to education.
This. They say that the kid who goes to preschool, so we're talking preschool.
Yes.
It said has an increased earnings of over the lifetime of more than 25% higher than their counterpart.
And there's also an impact to society, right? That we have here, and this is data that's been provided by an economist. So children who attend preschool cost society less in both transfer payments and remedial educational expenditures, a savings of roughly $4 for every $1 spent on pre-K. and they're also less likely to enter the criminal justice system, resulting in a $3 to $8 reduction in the cost for police, courts, and prisons for every $1 that's spent. Right. So the bottom line, according to this economist, is that society will get a return on their investment of $7 to $10 for every $1 that's invested in preschool education.
You know, my grandmother always said, a stitch in time saves 9. That's it. That's it. Do the work now
and don't pay for it later.
Don't pay for it later. So here's the deal. According to this article that she wrote, this is Senator Ruiz. There was
salute to Senator Ruiz, because she's been a champion on this.
Would love to have her on the show.
Yeah, on this school funding reform act. She's definitely she's a former educator, by the way, and she's a huge advocate of preschool programming throughout the state of New Jersey, and she's always representing the city of Newark very well, and other municipalities that fall within her district.
Right. So, according to this, it says that Senate Democrat leader with Republican support have been pushing to add funding for preschool in recent budgets. Unfortunately, the $17 million that they put into 2 years ago and the $25 million that they added last June, both of those were vetoed. Mm-hmm. Right? So here's what I'm going to say to you guys. Here's the tie-in. And I tried to get, last week, we tried to get a couple of gubernatorial candidates on. I tried to call a couple today. I was unsuccessful. Do you know where they stand on this?
And they've been very quiet about this. I'm very surprised that we haven't heard much about this from the number of candidates that we have out here right now who are seeking to be the next governor of the state of New Jersey, because this is one of the biggest issues that we have. When you talk about funding in the state of New Jersey, there's two major issues or concerns with them. One is the pension, and the other is how our school districts are being funded. And we've had the School Funding Reform Act that's been around since 2008. It hasn't been fully funded. We also have basically 9 years of our schools being flat funded. Right, this has kept in place the enrollment growth caps, and what that does is underfunded 70% of school districts. And then we also have schools that get what's known as hold harmless aid, and that provides the other 30% of those school districts with more state aid than they should receive. So you have this just unbalance of school funding. On one hand, you have a huge percentage of schools that are being underfunded, but then you have a small percentage of schools that are actually being overfunded. And schools should be funded based off of their enrollment. So by holding school districts harmless, these school districts are continuing to receive funding at an enrollment rate that they held in previous years. So let's say a school district had an enrollment of 10,000 students, but that's now going down to 8,000 students. If they're receiving hold harmless aid, those school districts are still being funded as if they had 10,000 students in their district, which means that additional funding that they're receiving should be going to another school district in another part of the state, but that is not happening.
Well, I'm going to tell you, I don't understand. You guys, and to what you said earlier. So with this news, this information, you can sit and cheer the students at HBCUs who want to boo Betsy DeVos, but in your own community, you have local elected officials who are not doing their job to ensure that your children have the foundation, right? So that they have the funds to have the foundation. And what I'm going to say is this. We can argue about Chris Christie vetoing this. And somebody in the Post said, oh, he's a criminal. But I want you guys to remember that there were black leaders who marched Chris Christie into our community and told people to vote for Chris Christie. I want you all to remember. And where is the outrage there? Where's the outrage? Where's the backlash to all of those black leaders, the Democrat Party who marched Chris Christie into the black community and told you to vote for him. I want you to understand that. So don't come on the thread and say, oh, Chris Christie is this. These are those same failed black leaders that I'm talking to you guys about all the time. And that you don't check them. You allow them to just do what they want to do. There's no hard check to make sure that what they do is in the best interest of the community. And so once again, these aren't just numbers, guys. These kids don't just wind up on the street one day. There is something that's happening. And so now when you see that you're not getting the funding, that out of over 180 some thousand kids right now, only 50,000 of them are getting that preschool education that they need, that will give them all of the benefits that we just talked about and keep them from the perils that we just talked about. Those kids are not getting it. 130,000 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds.
Now, how real is this in Newark? This issue of having available seats to provide pre-K education to students, this is a huge issue in the city of Newark, particularly in the South Ward. The South Ward does not have enough pre-K seats to service students who are of preschool age that live in the South Ward of Newark. You know, as a part of that, whole One Newark plan, remember, we talked about there being a number of initiatives. There was supposed to be a early childhood development center that was going to be open in the South Ward as a part of it. It never happened, never came to fruition. And for those individuals who really push back against that plan, there was no follow-up conversation to say, well, we still need to have a pre-K development, an early childhood development center inside of the South Ward, because you have a number of families who do not have access to it, period. So now what happens? Those kids are not enrolled in school, and then there become a lot of issues that we have to deal with in the future. And none of these things that we've just mentioned, as it pertains to the data that we discussed, none of those things are beneficial to our black and brown children. The fact that a student who does not have a pre-K, a preschool education, is more likely to be classified as a special education student. Now, let's unpack that a little more and go back to the earlier discussion that we had about certain schools that prefer to counsel those kind of children out. So when we talk about school choice, do our special education students really have the same access to school choice as every other student? No, they don't. We know they don't.
This is horrible, man. So I just emailed you. You can check your email when you get a chance, because there are things that you can do outside of going and talking to your elected officials, right? There's some things some interventions that you might be able to take part in, right? To be able to, and then me sending it to you, I lost the link myself. But you guys need to be, so here's the engagement part, right? So it's all the way down at the bottom of this thing. So it says what this means for you, right? So the paragraph before it, I'm going to post this link. It says, eliminating this inequity will require early interventions that directly address the problem. Preschool teachers can build on what children already know and respond to their interests, to introduce and reinforce new words. Here are some things you can do to help preschoolers build their vocabulary. So if your kid's not in preschool, right? Mm-hmm. Here are just a list of things that you can do. It says, 1, use new and interesting words in natural conversation. try this at meal times and things like that, right? So when you're sitting with your child, don't just use the same words. Well, let me slow down. I'm gonna back way up. The very first thing that you need to do is stop talking baby talk. We're gonna back way up.
No goo goo gaga.
Right? Stop. And then when your child is mispronouncing a word, don't reinforce it by pronouncing it the way that the child pronounced it.
Correct it.
Correct it. I see that all the time, man. Is it just me?
Yeah, no.
Right? So correct it. You're the parent. They're the child. So when they say it and then you repeat it exactly how they said it, then they believe that's the correct way. So early intervention, corrective behavior. Use gestures and facial expressions to help children make sense of new words. For example, when introducing the word joyful, you might smile and wave your arms and those kinds of things. Sing with your child.
So let's stop on that one for a minute. Why is that really important? What that does, it allows the child to actually visualize, the meaning
visual learning,
right? So it ties into the visual learning that can end up being a preference for a lot of individuals. I know, as an adult, there's certain things that I prefer to see visually. So again, that will help your child out in the long run. And if you're also, I would add to that, reading to your children. That also allows them the opportunity to visualize what's taking place in the story, and it helps get the creative juices flowing for those students as well. The imagination is a wonderful thing, so we need to continue to water that and allow that to grow for our babies.
Right. Talk with children and encourage children to talk with one another. Keep the conversation going by asking questions, making comments. So here's the thing. In the first 4 bullets I read, none of it talks about television.
True.
Right? It doesn't talk about television, doesn't talk about video games, doesn't talk about giving them your iPhone or your iPad or your other device to move them out of the way so that you can go and do adult things or watch your adult television shows. Right? This talks about engaging your children. The next one, it says read to children daily. Taking time to go over new words. Look for books with illustrations that provide clues to word meanings. Mm-hmm. Right? Again, we're not talking about busy time. We're talking about you understanding the fact that certainly if your child's not in preschool, the things that you can do to help close that 30 million word gap, right? So that they don't fall prey to all of these statistics that we're talking to you guys about. The next one, think about new vocabulary words that might come up on a field trip as part of the experience, a trip to an art exhibit. Take your kids places.
And did I not say this earlier? And this goes into that aspect of exposure. So when you're talking about field trips, the first thing that pops into a person's mind is when the school takes my child on a bus and they go on a trip. No. As a parent, you take your child on a field trip. And here in this article, it mentions taking your child on a trip to an art exhibit. Guess what? Register with the Newark Museum. It's free.
Free.
Doesn't cost you anything. If you drive, maybe some gas money. If not, public transportation or even an Uber or Lyft, whatever. Get yourself there. And if it's a nice sunny day and you don't live too far away from the Newark Museum, why not just go for a walk? Because that also provides another layer of
art
exposure.
galleries in Newark too, right? Yeah. You have the whole, we had Anthony Smith on yesterday, the whole Lincoln Park cultural, downtown thing. You've got City Without Walls.
Absolutely.
Down there, you've got Algira, mm-hmm. right? Down there, there's culture. Take your kid, get on a bus, walk, engage them. I see 4-year-olds and 5-year-olds, man, and they're training them on these smart devices, these iPads and these, other things to so that the kid can, what do they call it? they can entertain themselves. And so, he's good at that, or she's good at that. They entertain themselves, but they're not learning.
Yeah. So, there's something that I think is important. We talked about it. I think you mentioned it earlier, and just continuing to keep the conversations going. And I remember, as a kid, an adult told you to do something. Asking why was like code for I want to get slapped, or I want to get a beating, right? So I think it's important to teach our children to ask why, and I think we have to be mindful in having that conversation, because obviously we don't want our children to be disrespectful, but I think we do want our children to develop those critical thinking skills and to be critical of whatever it is that they're being told to do, because our children are creative and they might see things through a different lens and may be able to teach us as adults that there might be a different way, not necessarily better, but a different way of going about doing something, right? So I kind of push that on my son. We have our conversation. I like when he asks why, because I don't take it as a sign of my son being disrespectful, but I take it as a sign of him being inquisitive and him wanting to get a better understanding of whatever it is we're talking about. So if I say things to him like, "Hey, Jordan, I don't want you jumping off the stairs," or whatever the case, and he's like, "Well, Dad, why not? Or why don't you want me doing that?" Well, because if you do it, there's a possibility that this will happen to you, X, Y, and Z. And now I'm further able to ask the question to him, well, do you want that to happen to you? Do you want to get injured? Well, no, I don't, but I really like jumping. Well, is there something else that we could do that still allows you to jump, but minimizes that risk that's associated with you falling and hurting yourself if you're jumping off the stairs? So you have to always be willing to unpack conversations with your children. And now you're teaching them to think critically, because as they become young adults or they get into the school environment, I think you also want your children to be able to think critically about whatever they're being taught in that environment. So if something doesn't seem right or doesn't make sense to them, I don't think you want your child to just continue down the path accepting whatever's being given to them or whatever's being offered to them. You want them to be able to think critically and also ask questions and look at things objectively. And it starts in the household. And again, this is a great way to help expand their vocabulary and again further develop their critical thinking skills.
So there's somebody on the thread, and I may go check it out. She said, right now, for all you guys who are trying to figure out something to do for your kids, she said there's a nice Asian exhibit that's going on right now down at the museum. The other thing,
thank you for that, Miss Nelson.
Yeah, man. The other thing, parks where other kids your child's age, where they're playing, that you can take them there and encourage the conversation, right? You have to be a part of doing that as well. But it all starts with engagement. And the reason we're spending time on this is because this is foundational. You can't really have you can't have a meaningful conversation about all the other stuff if we're not dealing with this. Because now by the time the child gets into the first grade, right, now you've already got issues.
Yeah.
Already. And now you're playing catch up in the first grade because you didn't make the investment in these early years.
Oh, I mean, if we think about, really sit back and think about, or tie this into the conversation that we had earlier about how children and families are somewhat counseled out of schools.
Mm-hmm.
How, and you and I, how there's a little disagreement on this, but how we have systems in place where we're gonna take the high performing students who might have gone through preschool, right? Because they already had that advantage.
Well, I was gonna get back to that. Yep, we came full circle.
You see what I'm saying?
Yep.
And we're gonna extract those students. They're gonna be in, the gifted and talented program, the AP programs, etc. How do these students who missed out on these critical years, how do they now catch up?
Right. So what I'm saying to you is this, and I want you guys to weigh in. Call in 973-457-8000, because if I'm the parent who listened to this or knew this information, so I was engaged with my children at this early age, and my children were developing, right, and they had created that 30 million word gap, right? And so now my kid goes into the first grade and is sitting in a classroom with, you know, say, well, we use that figure that we saw earlier. 1/4 of it, or 3/4 of his class are 30 million words behind, right? And 1/4 of his class is caught up. I'm at some point, if I'm still engaged with my child, when my child is coming home, I'm expecting them to come home having learned more, right? And if they're coming home and I'm looking at the assignments and I'm still engaged talking to them about their day, and I realize that they're not, because the teacher is trying to figure out how to catch the 3/4 of the class up with the 1/4 of the class that the parents made the investment in, I got a problem. Because now I'm looking at my investment, my early investment, I'm looking at it being flushed down the toilet. Like literally by this teacher who's going, well, I appreciate the work that you did. Oh, you know, your child is very bright. And, you know, wow, he's one of the brightest ones in the classroom. But I don't have time to spend to continue, you know, that trajectory, right? So I got to work on these 2/3 or 3/4 of kids in the classroom whose parents didn't do that. I got a problem with that.
So now that will bring me to another question. How are students grouped into particular classrooms? Now, there's a conversation that takes place in schools when students go from one grade to the next, and there's a conversation about which students get what teacher. Now, some of the high-performing teachers who know how to work with those kinds of students, you'll hear from them at times that they always get the hard, the more challenging students, etc., etc. So I'm saying that to say, when we have conversations about re-engineering our public education system, we also need to be talking about how our students are being aligned with certain teachers and how diverse those classrooms are. There has to be, in my opinion, I don't have the answer to this right now, Eric, because I know you're probably going to be like, Rob, well, how you figure that out. I think that there needs to be a conversation to really talk about that methodology and how we determine how to best align these students with the resources, whether that's teachers,
But this is what I'm saying. But you guys elected board members who weren't having these kinds of conversations. Right? You guys are working with elected officials who aren't having these kinds of conversations. You guys are supporting elected officials who brought in a guy who ran and was successful in his second term for governor, who wound up vetoing twice millions of dollars that could have gone toward pre-K development. What are you doing? I don't understand what you're doing. But we have the rest in peace shirts. We got the sidewalk vigils. We got all of that, right? But we don't have the things that we need to make sure. And I'm gonna tell you. And so when you look at these kids in the street, and when I talk to some of them, I've been out talking to more and more of them, man. Now that that I freed myself from corporate America, and they say that adults don't give a damn about them, and it's hard to argue with that. When you draw this line, right, where you say, well, okay, you know what, if I told them, hey, look, black elected officials brought this guy, Chris Christie, into the black community and got other black folks, preachers, pastors, imams, to tell you all that he was good for you, right? They did that.
Because they wanted to have a seat at the table. And, when you look at these young folks that we have in the community, you're talking to them, there are a number of individuals in the community who are out talking to them. When you see what they're dealing with now, these individuals are a product of past failures, starting in pre-K, of past failures of individuals who have been selected to go out and to lead us in the right direction, period. Dude, there's been, let's be honest, Eric. So we had a conversation about whether or not the community is forgiving. Let's talk about that. Too much forgiveness equals no accountability. Period. Right. If you're willing to be that forgiving to individuals who have walked up to you, sold you lies, slapped you upside your head, done everything under the sun to to harm or hurt you, whether it was physically, mentally, spiritually, or emotionally, and you just continue to forgive those individuals, and they keep coming back with the same rhetoric, they keep running the same game over and over again, you're either stupid, one, or second, don't lack the heart or the will to hold those individuals accountable for what they signed up to do.
So here's my question, man. Like, the more I sit and talk, and I learned a tremendous amount from you, brother, and I appreciate you. And I hope that the people on the show, who listen to the show, see the value that you bring. But here's the question. You have the community getting outraged about the One North plan. You have the community getting outraged about Park. You have the community getting outraged about all of these other things. I don't see them getting outraged about the lack of funding for pre-K. I don't see them getting outraged that that a kid was suspended from school for 45 days when we understand what suspension means in terms of that school to prison pipeline. We don't see people getting outraged about all of those things, and it concerns me because those are the key performance indicators, guys. The whole Park thing, I think, was a ruse. The One North plan, I think, was a ruse. I think you guys are distracted from the things that are leading these kids out into the streets, and that's the fact that you got a quarter of them going into pre-K when we should have all of them going in. So let's get outraged about that now, because from now on you have that information. So every time you see a 3-year-old and a 4-year-old that's not in pre-K, what you do know is that they're more likely to be classified as special ed, right? They're more likely to be further behind, and then what were the other things? There were a whole bunch of them, but we'll post them. But when you look at that 3-year-old and that 4-year-old, and you don't see them in pre-K, go back to this thread and look at what they're likely to do.
Yeah, but and the thing about it is, I hate to say it, but in some instances, you see some of the characteristics and the traits. You know, when you see the young kids and they're not educated, you know, I'm critical that way. You know, I look at it through that lens, and I'm looking at this young person. I'm saying, man, is this young person missing out on their opportunity to be great? Is this person missing out on their shot?
And then you want to pour resources in later. You want to take and pour a bunch of resources when the kid is 15, 16 years old. And I'm saying that so understand this, right? Because resources are not infinite. We have a limited amount of resources. Yep. So now when you want to take and provide resources to the 15-year-old, because the 15-year-old is threatening to hit you over the head, right, to break into your house, to kill a family member of yours. Now all of a sudden we need to pour resources into that kid or those kids. Meanwhile, those resources that are being poured into those kids can't go into the ones who are starting the process all over again, the 3-year-olds and the 4-year-olds. So that's what we're doing. Like, it really, it's not a mystery, guys. Look at it.
But more importantly, you know, Newark should be, and
I want to finish this last point. I'm sorry. So now, when we have these young people who are having children, right, and they don't know how to manage it, right, and our community is not a community. It's broken apart. So that whole idea of it takes a village, that village doesn't exist. So that young 15-year-old or 16-year-old who's trying to now figure out how to raise this kid on her own, or multiple kids now on her own, because the dude is wherever he is, those kids are not in preschool, and the odds are that the mom is not engaging them in all of the ways that we just talked about. What are we doing?
So I want to say this, you know, if you out, for the listeners and the viewers, if you read the article that Eric posted, it specifically states that this gap exists between professional households and households where the parents are on welfare, right? And we tie that to this conversation of, you know, there being a need for pre-K seats, and also understanding that in many instances there are parents who just don't take advantage of it. Now I want to go back to this whole welfare, this public assistance piece. For any legislators who are listening, any policymakers, lawmakers, this is my personal opinion here. If a parent is receiving any type of public assistance and they have children that are eligible for pre-K education, it should be mandatory that those children be enrolled in a pre-K program in order for their parents to receive any public assistance. Any public assistance.
I like that.
Now, and that is something that can help us start to drive that accountability. And that's the thing, like, this whole accountability goes both ways. So, we have legislators, policymakers, lawmakers. They put laws and policies in place to help drive accountability for us, right? To make sure that our society is functioning in the way that it's supposed to. And then we, on the other end, we vote. We support individuals to be in these elected offices, and then we have to also drive accountability to make sure that the laws and the policies that they put on the books also benefit us. Now, that is one thing that I believe not only benefits the child, it benefits the parent, it benefits the entire community. And if we did that, then guess what? Now you have parents who are saying, well, I need to go and put my kid in this program. How can you now support a governor vetoing any bill that would support additional funding for pre-K expansions in the state of New Jersey or any state for that matter?
And this is why, one, I want you guys to look at the elected officials who gave you Chris Christie. They brought him into the community. They didn't support Barbara Buono, right? I went and pulled the lever for her. They didn't support Barbara Buono. They told you to take this guy who twice vetoed money. Now you have elected officials out there who are telling you to support another gubernatorial candidate, whoever it is. You got some saying support this one and that one and support her or him. What I'm asking you guys to do is this. Get involved in the politics. Understand where these gubernatorial candidates stand on this issue. It is a critical issue that if they're not dialed in and prepared to make it a priority, you can believe. It's a cycle. Those 3-year-olds become 5-year-olds and 10-year-olds and 12-year-olds. And they're the same 12-year-olds that you guys are afraid of in the street right now. They're the same 16-year-olds who you guys are concerned, are dropping out of school. They're the same 25-year-olds who are returning from prison, and you're trying to create these prison reentry programs to get them jobs, right? Those are who they are. So it's imperative, that you do that. And I think that, I'm looking at this, Rashon, and it's crazy. And so that Atlantic article where that we started with from the Atlantic, where they have this terrific school district where they're doing all of this work. The work has a lot to do with the fact that you have the community engaged.
Yes.
The community is engaged. You can't just send it out there. Then again, I want you guys to understand, and this is, we'll continue to talk about this, but even within our community, right, you have, or even within our town, you have families who are engaged. Not the whole community, right, but you have families who are engaged. And those families who are engaged are seeking high ground. Yeah. Because the flood is coming.
They want the best.
And they want the best. And then you guys who don't necessarily, see the benefits are screaming and hollering that they shouldn't have the best, or that they should wait for you to catch up. Mm-hmm. And I don't know that's fair.
So I know we have we got 5 minutes left, and there was another article that we came across, which this is posted in U.S. News on May 9th, and it says that black girls are twice as likely to be suspended in every state. Not in New York, not in Texas, not in Connecticut, in every state. And what this article breaks down is the fact that black girls face high and disproportionate suspension rates across the country. And it's not because they're misbehaving. It's more, they're not misbehaving more frequently than other girls. This uneven discipline is often the result of deeply ingrained racist and sexist stereotypes that push black girls out of school. According to this article, black girls are 5.5 times more likely to be suspended than white girls. And the report also found that they're more likely to receive multiple suspensions than any other gender or race of students. In Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Illinois, black girls are 8.5 times more likely than white girls to be suspended. And in the District of Columbia, where black girls represent 73% of girls enrolled in school, but 94% of all girls who are suspended, they're an astounding 17.8 times more likely to be suspended than white girls in the District of Columbia.
We got work to do, people.
So, I mean, so when people are having this conversation about the school to prison pipeline, I'm not sure if everybody actually understands that cycle and how this thing actually takes place. So you have students, and there's data that not only shows that black girls are suspended at disproportionate rates when they're compared to their white counterparts, but this same thing is true when you consider African American and Latino boys. Individuals who are suspended from schools are also more likely to drop out of school. And there's a study that I came across a few days ago that I think we should also post for the viewers and listeners, and it shows that 70 to 75% of all prison inmates in the United States of America dropped out of school. So again, that's the correlation when we're having that dialogue and we're talking about the school to prison pipeline. The data shows that the more that students are suspended, the more likely they are to drop out. And we also know, again, according to data, that 70 to 75% of those prison inmates in this country dropped out of school. Now, to add further insult to injury, let's connect that to this thing called modern-day slavery. Now, slavery was abolished here in the United States, except when a person is incarcerated. And for those of you who don't believe me, you can go and read that in the Constitution of the United States of America. So, suspending our black and brown students at disproportionate rates, right? That means they're more likely to drop out of school, which means that there's a higher probability that they will end up incarcerated. And once they're incarcerated, you are a slave.
Well, listen, this idea, this notion that there's some white people who are engineering a school to prison pipeline, I'm going to tell you that if you listen to what we talked about today, that school to prison pipeline really begins at 3 years old or 4 years old.
Absolutely.
So you as parents or guardians, what are you doing for your children or for your loved ones or those who you were responsible for giving care to ensure that they're on the right track from the get-go? Right, and so if you're not doing the job, then we need to be protesting you because you are adding to that school to prison pipeline. Now listen, hey Rashon, man, I appreciate this, man. We're always dropping some information for these folks, and look forward to having you back again. Maybe you can come back on wrap up Friday, because I'm sure we're going to have part of this as discussion.
Oh yeah, definitely. I think there's a lot more that needs to be unpacked when we talk about student discipline. And also, looking at the comparison between our traditional public schools and charter schools. It's a known fact that charter schools are suspending students at a much higher rate than traditional public schools. So we should unpack that as well.
We'll see you Friday. This is Eric.
And this is Rashon.
We're out.
Peace.
This has been the Eric Dawson Radio Show.
It's not just about...
May I be the first to say good afternoon. It's 12 o'clock.
Alternatively, grind mango seeds and mix with buttermilk. When taken twice a day, it helps to keep piles away.
Johnny, where do you get piles? Down there, so.
Yeah.
So if you go to the mango